I found out what my family really thought of me from a hospital bed. And honestly, that's the kindest way I can say it. My name doesn't matter. What matters is this. I was 34 years old, 6 weeks postpartum, and I had just been hit by a truck, running a red light on my way. Home from a late shift, 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, my right arm in a cast, and my newborn daughter was home alone. My husband was 6 hours away on a work trip. Someone had to get to my baby, and the person who lived 20 minutes from that hospital said no. Not, I'll be right there. Not, oh my God, are you okay? Just, no. My mother was at a casino. My sister was on a Caribbean cruise. And my mother told my husband, word for word, she couldn't come because she had to watch my sister's cat. A cat. My 6-week-old daughter needed someone, and the answer was a cat. I didn't cry. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I know what you're expecting. You're expecting the woman in the hospital bed to fall apart, to beg, to scream into the phone. I didn't. I looked at the plastic ID band on my wrist, picked up my phone with my one good hand, and started solving the problem. Because that's what I've been doing my whole life. If you've ever been the person everyone just assumes will figure it out, you already know exactly where this is going. I grew up tight, rented place, inconsistent heat, a mom who worked just enough to keep the lights on, and a dad whose health was always one bad month from a crisis. I clawed my way through community college on a closing shift, grocery store paycheck, landed a scholarship, and eventually became a senior financial analyst at a major corporation. The kind of job where when the numbers have to be right, they put you in the room. Numbers made sense to me. People were harder. My husband and I had been together since our mid-20s. We lived quiet. 1 used car, no debt, 2 solid incomes we barely touched. And for 9 years, I had been sending my parents $4,500 a month. I never said that number out loud. Not to my husband. Not to a single soul. I told myself it was for my dad's heart condition. For the mortgage. I told myself I was the only one stable enough to carry it. And somewhere along the way, being the stable one stopped being something. I did and started being something I was. That's a trap, by the way. The one nobody warns you about. The night of the accident, with my daughter 40 minutes away, and a nurse asking me gently if I had family who could come, I said the words I'd been saying my whole life. It's handled. I had already called a licensed overnight care agency. I'd researched before my daughter was born and never needed. A woman answered on the second ring. 40 minutes later, a night nurse I'd never met texted me a photo of my baby asleep, with her little fist tucked against her cheek. I stared at that photo for a long time, and then, in the dark of that hospital bay, I opened my banking app. I had 4 recurring transfers set up. I knew them by heart. $2,000 a month labeled mom and dad. $1,500 for what I believed was their mortgage. $900 under dad's medical expenses, $500 a month to my sister, labeled support, $4,500 every single month, for 108 months. I had never once let myself add it all up because the total felt like a door I couldn't walk back through. But that night, lying there with a cast on my arm and a machine counting my heartbeats, I made myself look. $486,000, almost $500,000, gone, one quiet automated payment at a time. While my mother told every relative in our family that they managed just fine on their own, I pressed cancel on the first transfer. A little green check mark appeared on the screen. Recurring transfer canceled. I pressed the second, the third, the fourth. 4 taps, maybe 20 seconds, and 9 years just stopped. I felt no rage, no satisfaction, just this strange flat clarity, like when a spreadsheet finally balances and you lean back and go, yeah, that's right. That's the number. But what happened next changed everything, because as I was closing the app, something in the transaction history caught my eye. A line item I'd never noticed before, buried under my dad's medical label from about 2 years back. It read, Loan M's you $40,000. M wasn't my dad's initial. It was my sister's. I locked the phone, lay there in the dark, listened to the monitor, and for the first time in 9 years, I made myself ask the question I had been too afraid to look at. Where had all of it actually gone? Before I could go down that road, my hospital room door opened slowly, and in walked my grandfather. He's 78, flannel shirt buttoned all the way up, moving careful with a cane he clearly hates needing. Under his free arm, he was carrying a thick manila folder, soft at the edges, held together with 2 old rubber bands gone pale and brittle. I hadn't told him which hospital I was at. He'd called around until he found me. He set that folder at the foot of my bed, like a man putting down something he'd been carrying a long, long time. Looked at my cast, looked at my face. His jaw worked for a second. "Your mother told me you had a little fender bender," he said. I drove past 3 exits before I believed her. He sat down in the vinyl chair, folded his hands over the top of his cane, and looked me dead in the eye. "I knew," he said. "I always knew. About the money, all 9 years of it, about where it was actually going, about what she's been telling this family the whole time." He tapped the folder once. "Not tonight, though. You've had enough tonight. We'll do this right, in front of everyone, where she can't slip out the side door." I didn't ask what was in it. Some part of me already knew it was going to be the thing that ended this for good. He told me one thing before he left that night, one piece of it, so I wouldn't walk into what was coming completely blind. My grandmother, his wife of 51 years, hadn't just slipped away peacefully the way I'd been told. In her last year, she'd gotten suspicious. She noticed my mother's spending, the new car, the casino talk that didn't match the story she told everyone else. She'd cornered my grandfather one night and said, "Somebody is keeping your daughter afloat, and it isn't us. Find out who." It took him a while. He's old and banks don't like to talk, but he'd spent 40 years managing books for a business, and he knows how to follow a number. He found me. He found 9 years of his granddaughter quietly bleeding herself, dry into a hole her own mother kept digging. My grandmother spent her last clear months with a lawyer, and whatever she'd set in motion had both their signatures on it. He stood at the door before he left and said one more thing. "She wasn't ashamed of you, sweetheart. Whatever your mother says when this is over, your grandmother trusted you with everything. That's why she chose you." Then he was gone, and I did not sleep at all. My husband walked into that hospital room the next morning, unshaven, gray in the face, carrying our daughter in her car seat and a diaper bag over one shoulder. He'd flown straight back, relieved the night nurse, and driven straight to me. He set the car seat on the bed and just looked at me. The cast, the bruising along my jaw. His eyes filled up fast. I told him not to, because if he started, I would too. And I had work to do. He lifted our daughter out and laid her gently on my chest, careful of my ribs. And for just a minute, the 3 of us breathed together. That's the only moment from that entire week I'd ever want to live again. Then my phone rang, my dad. His voice was thin, shaky. He used a nickname. He hadn't called me since I was little, and he said something that made my chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with my broken ribs. "I didn't know it got this bad," he said. "The money, the accident, I didn't know. I never wanted you carrying all of it." I heard him take a breath, like a man standing at the edge of something, like he was actually about to say the thing he should have said a decade ago. And then I heard her in the background, my mother's voice sharp and low, asking who he was talking to. The line went muffled. Hand over the speaker. When he came back, his whole voice had changed. Flattened out, retreated back to somewhere safe. "I should go," he said. "Feel better." And he hung up. That was my father, right there in one phone call. A decent man who had spent 40 years learning that the safest move in that house was to do absolutely nothing at all. I set the phone down, didn't say a word about it, just opened my laptop and did the one thing in this world that has never once failed to steady my hands. I built a spreadsheet. With my left hand and a whole lot of patience, I pulled 9 years of bank statements and dropped them into a pivot table. This is what I do for a company worth billions. I could certainly do it for my own life. I sorted the money by where it actually landed. And what assembled itself, cell by cell, row by row, was nothing like the story my mother had been telling this family for years. The mortgage payments I thought I was covering made maybe 10 times over 9 years, not 108. My dad's real medical costs, the actual cardiologist, the actual prescriptions, came to about $65,000 across the whole period. So where did the other $420,000 go? I filtered by withdrawal location, and a cluster lit up on the screen like a rash. Cash withdrawals, hundreds of them, almost all within 2 miles of one zip code. A zip code I recognized immediately, the casino. Not just that one night she skipped her granddaughter. For nearly a decade, on my dime. While telling a room full of relatives she managed just fine on her own. And then a second stream, smaller but steady, year after year, flowing somewhere else entirely. To my sister, $120,000, including that $40,000 chunk once filed under my dad's surgery label, so nobody would ever think to question it. A loan my sister apparently used to fund a year of brand building, a leased SUV, and a photo shoot in another country. I printed the whole 9 years onto one single page. 12 rows, clean, undeniable. Numbers don't have feelings. They don't get defensive. They don't cry on cue. They just sit there being true. I didn't know it at the time, but that one piece of paper was about to become the most powerful thing in the room. That's when everything shifted. My mother figured out the transfers had stopped the way. She figured out everything. When it cost her, the first of the month came and went with no deposit. By noon she was calling. I let it go twice. Third time I picked up. Her voice came through warm as fresh pie. "Honey, are you okay? We've been so worried about you and that baby, the woman who chose a casino and a cat." Worried sick. I told her I was recovering. Thanks. Then the warmth curdled, right on schedule, into the voice I'd been hearing my whole life. She said the account hadn't come through. Was it maybe a bank mix-up? I told her it wasn't a mix-up. Silence. Then the guilt trip, perfectly timed. After everything your father and I sacrificed for you. We kept a roof over your head. We were always there. I let her run. And then she went back to the one weapon that had never once failed to put me back in my place. She said it softer this time, almost wounded. "You know, your sister never has these emergencies." Third time I'd heard that sentence in 3 days. This time I didn't flinch. I just said, "I know, Mom," and let those words mean something she wasn't ready for. My sister never had emergencies because she had me. And now she had a declined card and a car payment she couldn't cover. That was going to have to be someone else's problem now. I hung up while my mother was still talking. First time in 34 years I'd done that. When the mom play fails, they send the aunt. That afternoon, my aunt texted me a paragraph of borrowed outrage. Said my grandmother would be ashamed of me. Said family takes care of family. The whole performance. That line about my grandmother almost got me. She was the one person in that family I genuinely never wanted to let down. But then I remembered what she actually said to me. That somebody had to watch this family's money, because her own daughter never would. So I didn't write a single word back. I just attached the one printed page. 12 rows. 9 years. And typed one sentence underneath it. "Here's where the money your sister says she manages on her own actually went. Ask her about the casino withdrawals." Then I put the phone down and changed my daughter's diaper one-handed. My phone buzzed once, the little dots showing my aunt was typing. Then the dots disappeared. No reply, not that hour, not that day. You can call a person dramatic. You can call her ungrateful. You can call her cold, but you cannot call a column of bank withdrawals dramatic. It just sits there being exactly what it is. Then my mother made her boldest move yet. She called a family dinner, framed it in the group chat like a wellness check. "Let's all get together, welcome the new baby, clear the air. Paige, I hope you'll come so we can put this little misunderstanding behind us." A misunderstanding. 5 days after she chose a cat over her newborn granddaughter. My husband read it over my shoulder and told me straight up we didn't have to go. We could stay home with our daughter and let them sit in it. He was right. I didn't have to go, but I knew exactly what Sunday dinner actually was. It was a stage. It was her assembling the audience she needed to pressure me back into line, to perform reconciliation until I caved the way I always had. She wanted witnesses to my surrender. So I decided to give her the audience, just not the surrender. I texted back 2 words, "Will come." Then I called my grandfather. We talked for 40 minutes. And at the end of it, he asked me one question in that quiet gravel voice of his. "You want it quiet? Or you want it true?" I looked at my daughter asleep in the crook of my good arm. This little life I had nearly missed while funding a lie. "True," I said. "Then I'll bring the folder," he said. I didn't ask what was in it beyond what he'd already told me. I just knew it was going to be the thing that closed this account for good. My sister flew back from the cruise the day before dinner and called me from the airport. "No hello, no are you okay? No are you okay?" Just launched straight into it. "Okay, so the cruise was basically ruined," she said. I was stressed the whole time about my card. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is to get declined in front of people?" I said nothing. She took that as permission to keep going. "Mom said you had some kind of meltdown and stopped the family account." Like, fine, have your feelings or whatever, but I have a launch coming, and I literally cannot function without it. Can you just fix it before dinner so we don't have to make this a whole thing? Fix it before dinner. As if my near death and my newborn's abandoned night were a minor inconvenience to her content calendar. I asked her one question. Quiet? Calm. Where do you think that money actually comes from? A pause. the first real pause I'd ever heard from her. "From Mom and Dad," she said, but it came out like a question, the tiniest crack of doubt I'd ever heard in her voice. "It's like a family thing, right?" I told her I'd see her tomorrow and let her sit with it. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to find out in a room full of relatives exactly, who had been signing her life for 9 years. And this time, there was no card left to decline and no story left standing to hide behind. Sunday came cold and gray, the kind of morning that feels like the sky already knows something's about to break. We pulled into my parents' driveway and I sat in the car for a second. Just breathed. I still had the hospital ID band in my coat pocket. I'd worn it for 5 days and never took it off. Not on purpose at first, but somewhere along the way it became something I needed to keep. A small, ugly piece of proof of exactly where I'd been the night my family checked a cruise itinerary instead of checking on me. Daniel had the diaper bag, had our daughter in her car seat, and from the curb behind us came the slow, careful tap of a cane. My grandfather, Sunday flannel, that worn manila folder tucked under his arm with its brittle old rubber bands. He'd driven separately so my mother wouldn't see us arrive together and have time to brace herself. He stopped beside me on the porch and looked through the front window. I looked too. They were all in there. My aunt, 2 cousins. My dad sunk into his chair looking like a man who already knew this day was going to cost him something. My mother moving through the room topping off coffee, playing wounded hostess, working the room before I even walked in. And my sister on the arm of the couch scrolling her phone, still sunburned from the cruise, completely unaware that her whole financial reality was about to be explained to her in front of a room full of relatives. My grandfather looked at me. "You ready?" I thought about every check I'd sent, every guilt trip I'd swallowed, every time I'd managed everyone else's feelings instead of telling a single truth, every automated payment that left my account on the 1st of every month, while my mother told people she managed just fine. "I'm ready," I said, and I meant it in a way I never had before in my life. He pushed the door open with the head of his cane, and the 3 of us walked in. 3 generations my mother least wanted under one roof. A baby, a cast, a folder, and 9 years' worth of receipts. The room went quiet the second we stepped in. My mother turned with the coffee pot in her hand, and her welcome smile already locked in place. And I'll give her this. She is genuinely gifted at performing. She set down the coffee, pressed a hand to her chest, and crossed the room toward my daughter's car seat with her eyes already glistening right on cue. Daniel angled the carrier away, gentle, calm, immovable. Her reach turned into a flutter, and then she turned to face the relatives instead of me, because that's always been her move. She doesn't perform for the person she's fighting. She performs for the audience. Her voice trembled perfectly as she told the room that her daughter had suffered a little accident, thank God, and had used it as an excuse to cut off her struggling parents, to abandon them in their old age over some imagined grievance. She dabbed her eyes. My aunt nodded along, though I noticed she wouldn't quite look directly at me. I knew my 12 rows were already sitting somewhere in the back of her mind. And then my mother went for the closer, the line that had worked on me for 30 years. She turned to face me with wet, wounded eyes, and a voice pitched exactly right for the cheap seats. "I don't understand where this cruelty comes from. Your sister never has these emergencies." 4th time, same sentence, in a warm, crowded room with everyone watching. She had no idea she'd just handed me the gun grip first. The room waited for me to cry, to shout, to crumble and apologize like I always had before. I did none of those things. I reached into the diaper bag under the wipes and pulled out one folded piece of paper. I didn't stand up, didn't make a speech, didn't raise my voice even slightly. I just unfolded that single page, smoothed it flat against my thigh with my one good hand, and set it on the dining table in the middle of the room where the light hit it clean. Then I said in the same level voice I used to present a quarterly forecast at work, "You're right, Mom. She never has these emergencies. I'd like to show everyone why." I slid the page to the center of the table. "This is every dollar I sent this family for the last 9 years, 486,000 of them." The room went so still I could hear the clock on the wall. The top rows are real. 65,000 for Dad's actual medical care, his cardiologist, his prescriptions, 11,000 toward this mortgage. I let that sit one beat, watched eyes move to the paper. The rest is the part Mom tells everyone she manages on her own. I touched the page lightly, not for drama, just to guide their eyes to the right rows. $290,000 in cash, Withdrawn over 9 years, almost all of it within 2 miles of the casino, and $120,000 to my sister, including $40,000 once filed under Dad's surgery so nobody would think to ask about it. My sister's head came up slowly from her phone, like someone surfacing from underwater. "That's where your card money comes from," I said. And I kept my voice gentle because none of what happened to her was her fault first. It came from me. It always came from me. Mom just never told you that part. My mother's performance had nowhere left to go. The tears she'd manufactured for sympathy were now just tears on a face caught in a full room. Her hand was trembling around nothing. I looked at her, and I did not raise my voice. Not even a little. "It's handled," I said. 3 days of grief and 9 years of silence compressed into 2 words, and they landed in that room like a gavel. She reached for the only tool she had left, started to call me a liar, ungrateful, dramatic, said I'd twisted everything, got as far as "your father and I never," and that's when my grandfather set his cane against the table and laid the manila folder down right beside my single page. He coaxed the old rubber bands off slow. They'd been on so long they left grooves in the cardboard. He opened it with the unhurried hands of a man who had waited over a year for this exact moment, and he spoke for the first time since we'd walked in, that dry gravel voice, somehow filling the room more completely than my mother's tears ever could. "I knew," he said, "to the relatives, not to her. I always knew. Ruth knew too. At the end she had me trace it." He drew out a thick stapled document. Official, a law firm's name, printed clean on the cover page. "This is your grandmother's trust, and mine. Last year, Ruth and I moved everything into it, the land, this house, which has always sat on our parcel, the accounts, all of it." He said the next part slowly, where everyone in that room could hear every single word. "It does not go to Linda. Linda doesn't manage a single dollar of it." He looked at my mother then, and there was no cruelty in it, no satisfaction, just a tired final clarity that was somehow worse than anger. "We left it to our granddaughter, and to the baby. There's a fund set aside for the little one's education. The rest stays in trust, the way Ruth wanted it, where it cannot be gambled away." He tapped the cover page once. "Our attorney says it holds. We made very sure it holds." My mother's face did something I had never seen it do in 34 years. The wounded matriarch mask just fell off, and underneath it was raw panic, because the house she was standing in, the story she'd built her whole identity around, the kingdom she'd ruled for decades, had just been handed in a stapled, legal document to the daughter she'd left in a hospital bed. The room stopped looking at me. The room looked at her. She cycled through everything after that, wept loud. When the room didn't soften, she turned on my dad. Said it was his mess too, said he needed to do something. My dad lifted his head, looked at me, and for one moment I saw it again. That same flicker from the phone call, like a man standing at the edge of something real. "Paige is right," he said, barely a whisper. "Linda, the casino, you know it's been..." Her head snapped toward him. That look she gave him was 40 years old, and he stopped, looked back down at his hands. That was the last word he said on the subject, and I felt something release in my chest. Not anger, just a quiet letting go, like finally setting down something heavy you carried so long you stopped noticing the weight. My mother turned to rage after that, threatened to fight the trust, threatened lawyers, said we couldn't just take her home. My grandfather answered before I could, mild as milk. "It was never your home, Linda. It was your mother's." In the corner, my sister was crying, real tears this time. The slow dawning horror of a young woman realizing the well had a bottom, and that she'd been standing on top of the person holding it up the whole time. I gathered my page, stood slowly because my ribs still didn't allow for drama even. When every part of me wanted to feel dramatic, I picked up my daughter's car seat, and I reached into my coat pocket and took out that soft gray hospital ID band I'd worn for 5 days. I didn't make a speech about it, didn't explain it to anyone. I just looped it once around the handle of my daughter's car seat and left it there, a small ugly reminder, right where I'd see it every time I carried her. The night I almost died and my family checked a cruise schedule, my mother was still talking, threats sliding into pleading. "Paige, honey, we can still fix this. We're family." But her voice had stopped being able to reach me. The way a song fades out when you finally walk out of the room it's playing in. I turned to my aunt, the one who'd sent me that borrowed outrage paragraph, and I said without any heat at all, "Thank you for reading the numbers. I know you'll tell people the truth." It wasn't a threat. It was just a fact. And she knew it. She nodded once. I looked at my dad one last time. He met my eyes. I gave him a small nod that meant I understood, and that I forgave him, and that I was still leaving. Daniel took the diaper bag. My grandfather gathered his folder and his cane, and the three of us walked back out into the cold. 3 generations my mother least wanted in one room, walking out together. I pulled the door shut behind me with my good hand, softly, because slamming it would have meant I still wanted something from the people on the other side. I didn't. Not anymore. The account was closed. Here's how it all settled, because I know you want to know. The trust held. My mother called 2 different lawyers. Both told her the same thing. Clean paperwork and a clear grantor are almost impossible to fight. The threat stopped quietly about 6 weeks later. My parents still live in that house. The trust allows for it during their lifetimes. I'm not in the business of putting a sick old man on the curb, no matter what his silence cost me. But the casino no longer runs on my margin, and a slot machine with no fresh money is just a sad room with carpet. My sister got a real job. Marketing firm. They don't care about her follower count. Last I heard, she was learning slowly that building something yourself feels different than having someone else quietly fund it. She texted me once, months later, just 3 words. Where'd it go? I sent her the same single page I'd set on that table. She never replied, but she never asked me for money again either. My aunt told the whole family the truth, exactly like I knew she would. The group chat went very quiet for a long time after that. My dad calls sometimes, only ever when he's alone in his car. I always pick up those calls. The night nurse who came the night of the accident still sends my daughter a card on her birthday. She showed up for a stranger's baby at midnight, and I will never forget that as long as I live. And my grandfather sold his place across town and moved 10 minutes from us. He comes for Sunday dinner every single week, and every single time he walks in, he sets that folder on my bookshelf. Just leaves it there. Says in case anybody forgets. If there is one thing I learned from a hospital bed and 4 taps on a banking app, it's this. The people who praise you for being the strong one are usually just describing the person they quietly decided they will never have to carry. Strength isn't the problem. Silence is. I was strong my whole life. I just stopped being silent too. And those are 2 very different things. The day you stop being someone's bank is the day you finally get to find out who you actually are outside of what you provide. For me, that turned out to be something I hadn't been in a long time. Just a mom to my own daughter, instead of a parent to everyone who refused to grow up. If this story hit close to home tonight, check one bank statement. Just one. Read it like it belongs to a stranger, and ask yourself honestly who you'd actually call from a hospital bed. Because the answer to that question tells you everything you need to know about where your energy should be going. Take care of yourself. Nobody else is going to do it for you, and you deserve someone who shows up.